Hello everyone. Today's video is all about gravity. This is room level 70 build with 40 strength and 20 int. In a flask I use equip loot tier and extra strength to one hand through its greatsword and power stance it with a star scourge, and I'll still get that light roll. Besides, it kinda fits the build thematically, as weight is just a force exerted on a mass by gravity, so we can say this character just manipulates it. Also, gravity stems from Latin gravitas, which also just means weight. I should mention that the whole build idea belongs to dashing. I just added few weapons and ashes of war to it. It's really well crafted and rather tanky, despite Source Seal. This is my only 70 plus build that does use Source Seal. First weapon I added is Troll Knight's Sword. It's a quality int Ags. Second R2 sends people flying, and Troll's Roar can make people free fall. If a person falls freely, he will not feel his own weight, which was Einstein's happiest thought, as he described. In all seriousness, this weapon is a bit underwhelming compared to other Ags on this build, but it's fine. It looks nice and R2s are interesting. I do wish it had phalanx as Ash of War instead of Roar. Waves of Darkness are obviously really mean, and its ultimate over-leveled Phantom's killer, especially with Cold proc. The Kevin's favorite, Starscourge Greatsword, is the shortest Ags. I'll make up for it with jumping attacks and using Ash of War to pull people. It has some vertical range too. In Invasions, Starcaller's Cry follow-up can land more often than you'd expect, and it goes through walls too. I've also put a Vacuum Slice on this build, as a smaller version of Ruin's Greatsword, Ash of War. Here, I totally expected the fireball to hit the wall. Anyway, it's really slow, does okay damage if both blade and wave hits, and gravity will get you even in vacuum. Now, let me ramble about gravity a bit. It's one of the four defining fundamental interactions, which causes mutual attraction between all things with mass or energy. Gravity is by far the weakest of the four. Just so you know, it's 10 to the power of 36 times weaker than the electromagnetic force. The gravitational attraction between the original gas matter in the universe allowed it to coalesce and form stars, which eventually condensed into galaxies, so gravity is responsible for many of the large-scale structures in the universe. Gravity has an infinite range, although its effects become weaker as objects get farther away. It's well known that gravity pulls the objects together with a force proportional to the mass of one times the mass of the other divided by the square of distance between them. This equation is called Newton's law of universal gravitation. It's taught in school and it predicts the motions of planets precisely. What's interesting though, the Newton's law of universal gravitation isn't universal at all. First, we know that when the gravitational force in question is really strong, Newton's law is just wrong. And the second, we know that when the gravitational force in question is really weak, we don't know whether it's right or wrong because gravity gets too weak to measure. Only in between, like on the scale of solar system, do we know that the law of gravitation reasonably applies. We haven't tested gravitational attraction for non-astronomical objects very well at all. So far, for objects a meter apart, we've only confirmed that the gravity between them follows the law to within around 1/100th of a percent, which is a trillion times less precise than our knowledge of the equivalent law for electricity. And our grasp on gravity gets worse the smaller you go. We have little to no experimental understanding of short-distance gravity influence at a subatomic level. The fact that there's so much uncertainty about gravity at short distances means that a lot of interesting revelations about our universe could be hiding under our very noses. One possibility, for example, is that there are not just 3 dimensions of space, but an extra one that only gravitational force can travel through, which loops back on itself at a scale of micrometers or smaller. Here's where Einstein's theory of general relativity comes in play. It is based on so-called equivalence principle that Albert Einstein had described as his happiest thought. This was mentioned earlier. If a person falls freely, he will not feel his own weight. In other words, acceleration and gravity are exactly equivalent and indistinguishable. We see this happening on the International Space Station. The pull of gravity at the station's distance is around 90% of that on surface, and yet astronauts float. The reason people float about up there is because they are constantly falling towards their planet. We might expect them to crash into Earth's surface, but they are also moving sideways at the just right speed to keep missing. That's what being in orbit involves. The equivalence principle shows that accelerating, as happens when a person falls, cancels out their weight. So Einstein made the leap from his happy thought to suggest that acceleration and gravity are in fact same thing. From the equivalence principle, general relativity says that energy, in form of mass, light, or whatever other form it comes in, tells spacetime how to bend, and the bending of spacetime tells that energy how to move. The concept of gravity is then that objects are falling along the bending of spacetime, and it was this warping that explained something Newton had never been able to show, why gravity was capable of operating at a distance. Did Einstein prove Newton wrong? Absolutely not. Newton's work was descriptive. He fitted a simple mathematical equation to what was observed. His mathematics tell us nothing about how gravity works, but as a description of the behavior of everyday things, it works very well, and still does. What Einstein did was to help us understand what causes the force we describe as gravity. He was able to show that there are certain circumstances, typically where a pull of gravity gets very strong, where Newton's equation is not a good enough approximation. Newton's theory worked just fine for all practical purposes, unless possibly you plan to visit a black hole. Now that those two concepts of gravity have been covered, let's get back into Elden Ring discussion. According to Ruin's greatsword description, it is originally a rubble that fell from the sky. The ruin it came from crumbled when struck by a meteorite. As such, this weapon harbors its destructive power. So, the way I see it, there's some relationship between gravity and time. Perhaps meteor hit imbued Farum Azula with gravity and lifted it. But we also don't know where it happened, and it may have been floating for other reasons. Also, I can say that time is slowed if gravity is stronger. Then why is it floating? Gravity Well description says that Rodan's teacher from Celia was an alabaster lord that rose from a meteor impact. That paired with the falling star beast at the end of the Celia crystal tunnel means that there's some evidence to stuff falling from the sky in Celia. And as we know, Rodan, as a protector of Celia, challenged the stars. But I cannot tell exact intentions of Starscatch conflict aside from just stopping it. It seems like Rodan has conquered the stars very soon after he completed his tutelage, and I like to imagine this character studied gravity alongside him. I am purposefully ignoring the part about his horse, Leonard. There's really not much to be said about Onyx and Alabaster Lords. I do like how they rose after meteor struck, and life on Earth also appeared after meteorites splashed with essential elements for it to exist. You can see They got some push and pull relationship in their weapons, and it reminds causality and regression. Causality pushes out, branching, dividing, marching along the expanse of time, and forming connections between all things that can be conjoined. Regression, on the other hand, pulls in. It traces all the causal branches back to the source, where everything was once one. It's really not unlike a tree when you think about it. Branches and roots may reach out as causality, but all of them trace back to the trunk as regression. I can say with Nerdface that actually gravity only attracts, so the representation of pushing is not exactly accurate. Anyway, here's to nice invasions and zones you don't get to invade very often. I've used my whole arsenal in this invasion, including all kinds of weapons, ashes of war and spells. There's no lore reason for me to use Gargoyle's sword. I just never used it, and I kinda like the way it looks. Overall, it's in the middle of the pack. Unfortunately, I didn't get any clips of using Watchdog staff, but it's mostly Ash of War stick anyway. Gus sword is longest, so that's why I put Gravitas on it. If it hurts, if the stab lands, and it's also great for PvE. Meteoric Blade also has Gravitas, and I do like the R2s. I decided to switch to main setup after Phantom died, and there was AFK Estus delivery there. Because the invasion been going on for a while, you see I eventually ran out of flask. I can still use most of my weapons, I just need to be aware of fat roll. There you will also see some synergy between Gravity Well and Lazuli Sword R2 at the right distance. I stick to the straight sword because I was kinda over this invasion at this point, and I didn't want to fight unlimited supply of blues. Ruin's sword is so short, I feel like Zweihander R2 would combo from Gravity Well. And final invasion of the video happens in a really rough spot. Coded swords and Placidus X ruin seem totally reasonable for rune level 70. I do have a more serious option on this build, in the form of heavy fasting sword with chilling mist for those cases. The Buster's Pull is just a better gravitas, and the damage is honestly not bad. So, because there's not many places I can go to, I decided to do some elevator shenanigans, and the only mistake was to show my back like that. It worked as planned, and then because gravity is on my side, host clips through the floor and dies, and I'd like to end the video on that.